The beasts and bosses of Elden Ring's Shadow of the Erdtree expansion can give even the most experienced Tarnished trouble. When that happens, the solution might be powerful incantations, skillful martial arts, or elegant swordplay. Or you could just bonk everything with a big ol' hammer. The Anvil Hammer and Devonia's Hammer are a pair of colossal warhammers unique to the Land of Shadow that can bring even the biggest enemies to their knees. Individually, they're powerful, but together, they form a devastating combination that hits for exceptional damage, staggering anything in their path. It makes for a hilariously destructive build, and we're going to show you how to do it. Two weapons form the core of this build. First up is the Anvil Hammer. The massive hammer is made from, you guessed it, an anvil. It's huge, hits like a truck, and combines both physical and fire damage in every hit. It has a built-in skill called Smithing Art Spears that causes a bunch of spears to erupt from the ground, damaging anything that walks into them. It pairs well with a Great Shield, and can be two-handed for great effect, especially if you have the two-handed sword Talisman. The Anvil Hammer is the prize at the end of the ruined Lava Forge intake. You can reach this place by crossing the Elec Great Bridge towards Castle Ensis, then heading south along the river. Once you're inside, you will need to make your way past some stone golems to reach this lever. Which raises a column out of the lava. Then, run up the column to the top to find this room, where the hammer will be waiting. Devonia's Hammer, meanwhile, resides in the ancient ruins of Rao, a later game area you will access by crossing through Shadow Keep. It's another colossal weapon, hitting just as hard as the Anvil Hammer, with a bit of holy damage thrown in for good measure. It has a unique weapon skill called Devonia's Vortex, which spins the hammer around before slamming it down for powerful area of effect damage. Devonia is a Crucible Knight, and you'll need to defeat her to get her hammer. She can be found in an open plain northwest of the Rao Ancient Ruins Site of Grace. Once you defeat her, she'll drop the Crucible Hammer Helm, more on that later, and Devonia's Hammer. These are two fantastic hammers, and both pair excellently with a fully upgraded Fingerprint Stone Great Shield for its great guard boost, and the improved guard counters from the Curved Sword Talisman. Or you could two-hand one of the hammers and take advantage of the extra damage you get doing that with a two-handed Sword Talisman. But why build around one giant hammer when you can have two? Both of these colossal hammers have similar attribute requirements, so fulfilling the enormous strength requirements for one means both are in play. And that's when the fun begins. Wielding both does two important things. First, it creates enormous damage potential when you swing both in unison. Second, it allows you to deliver blows that tear through enemy poise, leading to frequent stagger that opens them up for critical hits. Many fights will end in a single blow, or shortly thereafter. You can't change the affinity or Ashes of War on either hammer, but that's okay because Devonia's Vortex is exceptional. Not only does it do great damage in its area of effect, but it can be charged up for added effect, and it's great at crushing enemy poise. With that in mind, Devonia's Hammer should go in your right hand, while the Anvil Hammer goes in the offhand. That way you can use Devonia's Vortex with a simple touch of a button. Once you have your trusty hammers, it's time to grab some talismans to really unlock their full potential. We'll start with the Claw Talisman. This increases the power of jumping attacks. We'll be using those a lot with this build, making this a perfect fit. You get the Claw Talisman from Stormveil Castle. Start from the Rampart Tower side of Grace, head out the door, and take a running leap across to this rooftop. From here, walk up the broken pillar to a ledge, and follow it around until it turns back toward a large tower with a ladder. The Claw Talisman awaits at the top. Next, we'll equip the Arsenal Charm +1. This raises how much weight you can equip. Given how heavy both of the hammers are, that's an essential piece if you want to wear decent armor and still be able to effectively dodge incoming attacks. The Arsenal Charm +1 is in the Altus Tunnel, northeast of Lanedale, Royal Capital. Keep left in the tunnels until you come to a blue and purple colored room. From here, veer down the tunnel to the right, and jump onto the large root. Climb it up, and the Arsenal Charm +1 will be sitting on top of the wooden structure. For the next talisman, we suggest the Shard of Alexander. This boosts the damage done by skills, which in this case primarily means Devonia's Vortex. That attack quickly goes from good to great, especially when paired with a particular piece of armor that we'll talk about later. You get the Shard of Alexander from completing Iron Fist Alexander's questline in Elden Ring's base game. We have a step-by-step guide to walk you through it, culminating in a one-on-one duel with Alexander and crumbling Farum Azula in the very late stages of the base game. If you don't want to bother with this quest, you can also kill him anytime you see him for the Warrior Jar Shard, which confers a similar, but weaker, skill damage boost. The last talisman slot is a bit of a wild card. You could use one of these options full-time, or rotate based on need. Most of the time we recommend the Ritual Sword Talisman, which increases your damage when you have full health. Given how often you'll be one-shotting basic enemies, you tend to be at full health a lot. This comes from Queen Gillica, an optional boss in the Cook's Ruins. If you find yourself fighting a lot of shielded knights, however, it's worth swapping in the Hammer Talisman. This massively increases stamina damage to blocking enemies, leading to fast staggers and easy critical hits. You get this by defeating an invader named Recusant Henricus, just outside the doors to Limgrave Colosseum. Finally, for boss fights, the trusty Dragon Crest Greatshield Talisman, with its strong damage reduction, can be helpful for keeping you alive long enough for your hammers to do their work. This is a chest in the Halig Tree, after the Drainage Channel Site of Grace. In general, we suggest almost any build have at least 50 vigor. Not only does swinging the hammers consume a lot of stamina, but their weight has a large impact on max equipment load, so we suggest bringing endurance up to at least 40. Using both Devonia's hammer and the Anvil hammer will require a minimum of 39 strength, 13 dexterity, 11 intelligence, and 20 faith. Once you've reached that, focus almost all of your extra points into strength. This will be the best source of damage until your strength reaches 80. After that, leftover points can go to your dexterity, though it may be worth adding a few points to mind to give your skills a little extra FP to pull from. There are two things you should focus on with your armor. For your helm, gloves, and greaves, we recommend the Crucible set. Each piece increases the damage of aspects of the Crucible, a category that conveniently includes Devonia's Vortex. You can get everything you need from the Crucible Knight Ordovis in the Oriza Hero's Grave, though we recommend swapping out the helm in that set for the better defensive stats of the Crucible Hammer Helm that Devonia drops. Next, you should grab the Raptor's Black Feathers from the Sage's Cave in the Altus Plateau. It increases the power of jumping attacks, and its effect stacks with Claw Talisman, perfect for those flying hammer attacks. The idea of this build is simple. Smash. See a big enemy, giant enemy, smash. Little tiny guys? You're not gonna believe this, but smash. The majority of the time, you'll be using the Jumping Light attack for your offhand weapon. Doing that causes your character to swing both hammers in rapid succession. Each hammer applies damage to health and poise, setting you up for fast kills. Most basic enemies will die in 1 or 2 hits. Those that don't will often be staggered after 1 or 2 more hits. Approach their front or rear and press your standard light attack button to go into a critical hit animation. The main hand heavy attack can be charged up and is a great guard breaker on shielded enemies. The offhand heavy attack will summon Devonia's Vortex. This has a bit of a windup and must be charged, so when to use it will require proper timing. But once you get it down, it brutalizes anything around you. If you find yourself in the middle of a group, you can quickly two-hand the Anvil Hammer in order to use its Smithing Art Spear skill to give yourself some space. It's also well worth keeping a seal at the ready, since the faith requirements to use these hammers is more than enough to cast some great incantations, like Flame Grant Me Strength, which increases your physical and fire damage. Against bosses, your goal will be primarily to get in and out with quick hits, primarily jumping attacks, trying to set up as many critical hit opportunities as possible. Anytime you recognize a longer recovery phase, that will be your cue to spin up Devonia's Vortex. If you decide that fists are all the hammers you need, then be sure to check out our guide to the martial arts focused Dryleaf arts. You can find those and more in our ever-expanding Shadow of the Erd Tree wiki. And for everything else, stick with IGN.